Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, the leadership race hots up as the deadline has just passed for 20 MPs needing to have backed a candidate for them to stay in the first round, as Rishi Sunak remains the front runner to be the next Prime Minister. We'll hear from national treasure gold medal winning Team GB hero Mo Farah as he reveals he was brought to the UK illegally as a child and forced to work as a domestic servant. We'll have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes as it continues to stay incredibly warm, particularly overnight. Also on the way, Arsenal legend Paul Merson opens up on his struggles with gambling and alcohol addiction as he fronts a new initiative for 24/7 support. And you'll hear from comedian Rajiv Karia on his first hour of stand-up, coming to London, tapping in to millennial anxiety. But first this evening, to the leadership race, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab publicly declared his support for former Chancellor Rishi Sunak to become the PM and leader of the Conservative Party. Sunak officially launched his bid from behind a podium as a candidate today, with a speech saying he's all for traditional Conservative economic values rather than fairy tales, while the bookie's favourite also said he refuses to demonise Boris Johnson in his campaign.
So let me tell you how I see it. Boris Johnson is one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. And whatever some commentators may say, he has a good heart. Did I disagree with him? Frequently. Is he flawed? Yes. And so are the rest of us. Was it no longer working? Yes. And that's why I resigned. But let me be clear. I will have no part in a rewriting of history that seeks to demonise Boris, exaggerate his faults, or deny his efforts.
Yeah. Well, Grant Shapps also pulled out today and backed Sunak too. The first round is tomorrow. The window for candidates to get onto the ballot just ended. It was 6 p.m. They needed the backing of at least 20 MPs to move forward to the first vote. Favourites Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss and Tom Tugendhat met that threshold earlier today. Outside bet Tugendhat, one of the only prospective new leaders not to have held a position in Johnson's cabinet, backed by the One Nation wing of the Tory party, launched his bid too.
We need leadership with a renewed sense of mission. Leadership that sees beyond divisive politics and delivers results. Leadership that will return government to the service of our economy, our people and our country. We need a clean start. For me, that is much more than just a slogan or a catchphrase. It's a mission statement. It describes our path forward together. It summarises our advance orders for the next decade. It allows us to move forward together, a fresh, optimistic, enthusiastic, confident, post-Brexit, and ready to seize the moment anew. That is why I'm introducing my 10-year plan for growth. It will return our government to the service of the British people and the British economy. It will make our economy stronger, our society fairer, and make our country more resilient.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says Labour is set to force a confidence vote on Boris Johnson's government, as it is intolerable for the country to have the PM remain in charge whilst we wait for a new leader. Let's hear from him.
Well, look, we were very clear that finally the Tory party concluded that Boris Johnson was unfit to be Prime Minister. That was blindingly obvious a very long time ago. But having come to that conclusion, they can't now expect the country to allow him to cling on for weeks on end. And so it's very important. We said that if they're not going to remove him themselves, and it looks like they're not, then we would step up in the national interest and bring this vote of no confidence. And frankly, any Tory that in the last few days has said they don't think the Prime Minister's fit for office because he can't tell the truth, he can't be trusted, how can they tomorrow go through the lobby to say he should stay in power for another few weeks?
Well, let's just move away from the leadership race now. Mo Farah has revealed he was brought to the UK illegally as a child and forced to work as a domestic servant. The Olympic star, who has lived in London for most of his life since, has told the BBC he was given the name Mohammed Farah by those who flew him over from Djibouti when he was 9 years old. His real name is Hussein Abdi Kahin. The long-distance runner has previously said he came to the UK from Somalia with his parents as a refugee. Well, he's told his never-before-heard story in an upcoming BBC documentary.
People know me as Mo Farah, but it's not my name or it's not the reality. The real story is I was born in Somaliland, north of Somalia, as Hussein Abdi Kahin. Despite what I've said in the past, my parents never lived in the UK. When I was 4, my dad was killed in a civil war. You know, as a family, we were torn apart. I was separated from my mother, and I was brought into the UK illegally under the name of another child called Mohammed Farah.
This is the visa document.
Yeah, this is the visa to come to the UK, and this was the document we came with.
You would have been 9, you hadn't turned 10 yet.
Yeah, that is my photo, but it's not my name. From that moment, coming in, it was a different name and different identity. I know I've taken someone else's place, but I do wonder, what is Mohammed doing now?
There you have it. Let's just move on to some other stories from the capital today. Heathrow Airport is limiting the number of passengers who can depart each day over the summer as the UK's biggest airport struggles to cope with the rebound in demand for air travel. No more than 100,000 people a day will be able to depart from now until the 11th of September. That's 4,000 fewer daily passengers than currently expected. The hub said it had ordered airlines to stop selling summer tickets to limit the impact it would have on passengers. 2 teenagers have been arrested after hundreds were evacuated as a large blaze erupted at a block of flats in Hertfordshire this morning. Firefighters were called to the 16-storey Abbey View in Garsmouth Way in Watford at around 5 a.m. It's believed an outside bin was set alight and flames spread to the nearby building. 2 boys aged 13 and 14 have been arrested in connection with the investigation and remain in police custody. A man has been charged with twice trespassing on the grounds of Buckingham Palace. Well, Daniel Bridges, who's 33 years old from Portsmouth, allegedly entered the grounds of the central London royal residence on the 18th and 22nd of December last year. He's also accused of criminal damage after allegedly damaging the barbed wire fence that surrounds the property on the 18th of December. Let's just take a look at the weather for you now. Tonight will be rather cloudy with a few clearer interludes later. A very sticky night to come though, I'm afraid. It will still be around 23 degrees in the early hours of this morning. No respite until the morning, and then it builds to another very warm day, a 30-degree high tomorrow. Thursday and Friday, very bright as well. Very sunny, around 28 degrees for both until temperatures get a bit ridiculous as we move into the weekend. An amber warning in place for London as we could hit 40 degrees, the hottest day in our history here, potentially on Monday next week. Well, given all that, sweltering office workers and residents at Canary Wharf will be able to cool off in a former dock after it was turned into a new open water swimming venue because of the weather. The 220-year-old middle dock, where dozens of ships were once loaded with exports, will have 600 square metres of open water to swim in, set against the backdrop of the One Canada Square and Newfoundland apartment block skyscrapers. It will be open daily until the end of September and overseen by lifeguards, taking swimming with sharks in the financial district to slightly more literal levels there. Right, we're taking a break now, but still to come. There's no cure for addiction and recovery is for life. Paul Merson on his struggles with his mental health throughout his recovery from gambling and alcohol addiction. He'll be with me talking through a new way to help all year round.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
to London Live News. Let's just take a look at some other stories affecting Londoners on a national level. Train drivers are very close to going on strike and could walk out within weeks, according to their union. Drivers at 8 rail companies voted yesterday in favour of industrial action in a row over pay. ASLEF members at companies including LNER, Arriva Rail London and South Eastern Trains voted 9-1 in favour of strikes. On turnouts of more than 80%, well, Mick Whelan, General Secretary of ASLEF, said there wasn't a date set yet, though unions must give 14 days notice before they strike. Retail sales are falling at a rate not seen since the depths of the pandemic as prices hit household budgets. That's according to the British Retail Consortium, who said shoppers are cutting back on white goods such as fridges and dishwashers, as well as opting for cheaper brands. Well, prices in the UK are currently rising at their fastest rate for 40 years. Inflation, the rate at which prices rise, hit 9.1% in May. Friday evening is set to be a more relaxed affair for the Lionesses after they've already secured a quarter-final space in the Women's European Football Championships after their 8-0 win against Norway last night in their second group game, the biggest victory in the tournament's history. Well, Arsenal's Beth Mead is the tournament's leading scorer after netting a hat-trick to add to her goal versus Austria.
I'm honestly just enjoying every minute of my football and being part of this team, and the way we've been playing and the people that I have around me make it really easy to play.
Now, from one Arsenal legend to another, a special interview with much-loved football TV pundit Paul Merson. Over a third of people in the UK are affected by addiction, with a stigma still existing around those who suffer. Well, in his playing days at Arsenal, Paul was severely affected by alcohol, substance abuse and gambling addiction. The problem still surfaces its ugly head in his life today after he lost a house he was planning to buy for his family during lockdown. He's fronting the launch of a new platform called Recovolution, a new online hub which supports people in recovery to stay there longer, as addiction is something that never leaves you. Paul joined me to talk about that very thing.
You don't just stop and that's it and you're cured. You know, it's still there. It's just you got to arrest it a day at a time. And that, lucky enough, that's what I do, a day at a time. You know, if someone said to me, James, you can't take another drug, drink or gamble for the rest of my life, I'd find that impossible. I really would. I'm not going to lie. I would find it impossible. But I get up in the morning, I say I won't have a drink, a bet or take drugs today. That is doable for me. That is so doable.
Yeah. What do not a lot of people understand about the lowest ebbs you got to in your playing career, perhaps when it was more alcohol and substance abuse, more recently when you've become a much-loved pundit on our TV screens, and you've been very open about all this stuff continually. But what do people not understand about when you get to that incredibly low point?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to take my life on numerous occasions where I've been so depressed. I mean, with gambling, I don't know anything like it in drop from high to low. I mean, you could be as high as a kite winning, everything's great, and you could lose everything in 10 seconds and you're down so low. I mean, it's so unexplainable. When you're drinking and taking drugs, it's sort of, there's such a high and then you come down slowly. With gambling, there's no in between. You're either up here and you're winning, you can't stop, and then bang, everything's gone. And for a compulsive gamblers who are still struggling out there, they will understand that. You know, a normal gambler who can gamble normally, they wouldn't understand that. But with compulsive gamblers, this is that feeling of being so high and so low so quickly, and that's why more people commit suicide through gambling than any other addiction in the world, because it happens so quickly.
Yeah, and what's interesting is there's still a stigma towards people who struggle with addiction. People still think that this is something that they can choose to do. They go, oh, well, you know, show some self-restraint, just have a drink and then stop there. Why can't you do that? There's still a small proportion, it's getting a lot better, admittedly, of people that that still think that, and does that shock you when you get confronted with views like that?
Yeah, it does shock me. It does shock me. Next time you get diarrhea, try and stop that with willpower. I don't think it'll work, but have a try. For me, yeah, there's still a stigma out there. I done an interview just now with someone who's very respected, who I really like, really dearly, and he just said it's a mugs game. I mean, that sums it up. It's like saying, "Oh, you're a mug." I'm not. I'm an ill person. I have an addiction. I didn't choose to do it. I have a choice today. I didn't have a choice in them days. I didn't know. I just thought I was a weak person who's trying to get strong and trying to become a good person. I didn't have the choice I have today. I know today I'm an ill person. As soon as I start gambling, everything's going. Everything. I will not stop until I've lost. If I'm winning and I lose, I will still chase that loss back. A compulsive gambler will keep on chasing their losses. A normal gambler will lose what they can afford to lose. I know today I have a choice, and that's a nice choice to have. Nice choice. I'm not a mug. I'm an ill person.
Yeah. Well, you're an inspiration to so many people in the way you talk about these things and the way you've turned your life around, both many different stages along your addiction sort of journey. Tell us a little bit about this online platform then, and how you've also managed to sort of save yourself and get through day to day.
Yeah, I mean, with Recovolution is a platform which is 24/7 for recovering addicts, which for me is so important. You don't get up in the morning, addiction goes, all right, between 9 and 5 today, you might be struggling. People are around. I've woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning with bad anxiety, and when Paul gets bad anxiety, Paul needs to get out the way he feels. The natural reaction for Paul over the years has been to have a drink, have a bet, or take a drug to get out the way I feel. I have to live with that now. I have to sit with my feelings and sit how I feel. With Recovolution, it's 24/7. So if I get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't feel right, I can connect with someone in New York or in Los Angeles or in another part of the world where it might be daytime there. It's hard to connect with someone at 2 o'clock in the morning if you just woke up. And, it's hard to get hold of someone. So this is 24/7. And it's to talk and be around recovering people. I don't, if I told someone, I don't want to say to someone or my wife and say, after 3.5 years, I feel like a drink today. I feel like a drink. She'll go, what are you talking about? You're 3.5 years. What do you want to drink for? That's not the thing. I need to talk to a recovering addict who's been in the position of going, wait there, Paul, that's not the solution. That's just going to make you worse. That's not going to make you better. That's not. Why do you want to have a drink? Yeah. And that's why I need to be around. And I think with Recovolution, it's such a strong platform to get and talk to people because in recovery, before you get into recovery, you think you're the only person. You honestly think you're the only person, and you're not the only person. There's over 100 million people around the world recovering from addiction.
Lots more on Recovolution's website for more information and for help generally. There's plenty if you search for the NHS website. They'll have all the links and numbers you may need if you are affected. We'll hear more from Paul later as well as he talks to me about his thoughts on the upcoming Premier League season. We'd be remiss not to get his thoughts on that, having had him on this morning. Now, on to another story now. New data has been released about the risk of overusing inhalers. The new data says that 1 million in the UK are at risk of an asthma attack, being hospitalised and dying from their condition. And in terms of London, the new data says that almost 1 in 5 of people with asthma in London are using 6 or more inhalers a year, which is triple what experts suggest. Well, Maddie spoke to Asthma and Lung UK to find out more about the impact it's having.
Our Asthma and Lung UK survey found that about 1 million people in the UK are at risk of asthma attacks because they're over-relying on their reliever inhalers. This accounts for about tens of thousands of people in London itself. Now, there's 2 types of inhalers. There's your preventer and your reliever. And actually, we know that it's much better for people to be using their preventer on a daily basis, building up protection in their lungs and reducing the inflammation that asthma causes. But often people are reaching for their reliever as it's one that relieves short-term symptoms, but this is just not good for long-term use. And if people are using it more than 3 times a week, they really need to get some help from their GP. Inhaler overuse is a really complicated problem, and it can be for really personal reasons we found in our survey. We also found that Sadly, basic rates of asthma care are at dismal levels, at the lowest that we've seen for the last 6 years. Only 30% of people that we asked were receiving this asthma basic care. And this means things like having their annual reviews with healthcare professionals. Less FaceTime means less opportunities for healthcare professionals to give out this advice and change the way people are using their inhalers. And also the guidance is really outdated. So today we're calling on NICE to change the guidelines for asthma and make sure that both preventer and reliever inhalers have the right balance in these guidelines. The impact could be huge. Overusing these inhalers means people are at risk of uncontrolled asthma. This means asthma attacks, hospitalisation, and in the worst cases, death. The UK has some of the worst records for asthma in Western Europe, so we should be doing everything we can to keep people out of hospital. And ultimately, this is a condition that is preventable if it's well managed. So there's a real opportunity here for government to stand up and reduce lung health deaths. To change this, we want to see much more prioritisation from government on respiratory across the board. They're refreshing the long-term plan for the NHS at the moment. Good things have been happening around inhaler overuse, but much more is needed. We also need far more medical research into respiratory disease. It's been vastly underfunded for years and years compared to things like cancer and cardiovascular. So we really have to address this chronic underfunding, as well as dealing with all the backlog from the pandemic.
You're watching London Live News with James Dickman. A reminder of our top story is coming up after the break. Also on the way, more from Merson. He says the Premier League is getting harder and harder for everyone in the top flight. He'll give his insight into some of the London clubs this season who he thinks might struggle.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just have a reminder of our main story this evening on the leadership race. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab publicly declared his support for former Chancellor Rishi Sunak to become the PM and leader of the Conservative Party. Sunak officially launched his bid from behind a podium as a candidate today with a speech saying he's all for traditional Conservative economic values rather than fairy tales, while the bookie's favourite also said he refuses to demonise Boris Johnson in his campaign.
So let me tell you how I see it. Boris Johnson is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And whatever some commentators may say, he has a good heart. Did I disagree with him? Frequently. Is he flawed? Yes. And so are the rest of us. Was it no longer working? Yes. And that's why I resigned. But let me be clear. I will have no part in a rewriting of history that seeks to demonise Boris, exaggerate his faults, or deny his efforts.
Well, Grant Shapps also pulled out today and backed Sunak too. The first round is tomorrow. The window for candidates to get onto the ballot just ended. It was 6 p.m. They needed the backing of at least 20 MPs to move forward to the first vote. Favourites Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss and Tom Tugendhat met that threshold earlier today. Outside Bet Tugendhat, one of the only prospective new leaders not to have held a position in Johnson's cabinet, backed by the One Nation wing of the Tory party, launched his bid too.
We need leadership with a renewed sense of mission. Leadership that sees beyond divisive politics and delivers results. Leadership that will return government to the service of our economy, our people and our country. We need a clean start. For me, that is much more than just a slogan or a catchphrase. It's a mission statement. It describes our path forward together. It summarises our advance orders for the next decade. It allows us to move forward together, a fresh, optimistic, enthusiastic, confident, post-Brexit, and ready to seize the moment anew. That is why I'm introducing my 10-year plan for growth. It will return our government to the service of the British people and the British economy. It will make our economy stronger, our society fairer, and make our country more resilient.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says Labour is set to force a confidence vote on Boris Johnson's government, as it is intolerable for the country to have the PM remain in charge whilst we wait for a new leader. Let's hear from him.
Well, look, we were very clear that Finally, the Tory party concluded that Boris Johnson was unfit to be Prime Minister. That was blindingly obvious a very long time ago. But having come to that conclusion, they can't now expect the country to allow him to cling on for weeks on end. And so it's very important. We said that if they're not going to remove him themselves, and it looks like they're not, then we would step up in the national interest and bring this vote of no confidence. And frankly, any Tory that in the last few days has said they don't think the Prime Minister's fit for office because he can't tell the truth, he can't be trusted, how can they tomorrow go through the lobby to say he should stay in power for another few weeks?
Well, let's just move away from the leadership race now. Mo Farah has revealed he was brought to the UK illegally as a child and forced to work as a domestic servant. The Olympic star, who has lived in London for most of his life since, has told the BBC he was given the name Mohammed Farah by those who flew him over from Djibouti when he was 9 years old. His real name is Hussein Abdi Kahin. The long-distance runner has previously said he came to the UK from Somalia with his parents as a refugee. Well, he's told his never-before-heard story in an upcoming BBC documentary.
People know me as Mo Farah, but it's not my name or it's not the reality. The real story is I was born in Somaliland, north of Somalia, as Hussein Abdi Kahin. Despite what I've said in the past, my parents never lived in the UK. When I was 4, my dad was killed in a civil war. You know, as a family, we were torn apart. I was separated from my mother, and I was brought into the UK illegally under the name of another child called Mohammed Farah.
This is the visa document.
Yeah, this is the visa to come to the UK, and this was the document we came with.
You would have been 9, you hadn't turned 10 yet.
Yeah, that is my photo, but it's not my name. From that moment, coming in, it was a different name and different identity.
Now, back to our interview with former Arsenal legend and broadcaster Paul Merson. This time we spoke about his thoughts on how the London clubs will fare in the upcoming Premier League season, starting with his beloved Gunners. Some big signings, well, perhaps one big signing in Gabriel Jesus. What are your predictions for them for this season? Because, you know, for a lot of Arsenal fans, Gabriel Jesus is a big name, but if a lot more doesn't get sort of added to the roster, people might start thinking, oh no, this is Groundhog Day for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta. It sort of keeps going round and round and round of sort of mediocrity.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a great signing. I think he ticks the box. I think Arsenal need a centre-forward. They need a goal scorer. For me, he's a goal scorer. I think, yeah, they need a couple more players. Of course they do, but I mean, there's a lot of teams out there that need a couple more players. It's not just Arsenal, and that's the problem. You're up against so many, you know, you talk about Rafinha and everybody's thinking, oh, Rafinha's coming. Now Barcelona jump on the bandwagon, you know, and Chelsea have been looking at him. It's so hard to get players. I think it's a start. I think Jesus is a major player. I really do. If he comes in and doesn't score the goals, it's not Arteta's fault. You know, we've seen this lad's played for Man City, who've got a winning mentality. He's played in big football matches, but it's getting harder and harder. Arsenal going by him, you know, and up the road, Tottenham going by very well as well. You know, Chelsea look like they might get Sterling. I mean, it just gets harder and harder.
Yeah, it does. Well, talking about Spurs, there is a feeling in the air, perhaps it's just social media and the way people sort of ham these things up a bit louder than perhaps is the reality, but it does feel like this could be their year. They could potentially be world beaters with their signings and the feeling around the club with this new stadium as well.
They bought well. They bought well. They bought well. No, they have bought well. They got an elite manager. I mean, I think that's the thing that I think a lot of people miss the trick is they have an elite manager. They have one of the best managers in the world. You know, and we're looking at a team that haven't won anything since, I think it's 2008, and they have one of the top managers in the world. I think that's where you've got to give Tottenham credit. You know, they've gone for Conte, got him, and he'll build a team. They bought very well. You know, I think this season, fourth. Maybe they're fighting with Arsenal for fourth place. And if they won a trophy, I think that would be amazing for Tottenham. Of course it would, if you've gone that long without winning one. But they're going in the right direction. There's no doubt about that. Tottenham are going in the right direction.
And finally, just enough time, I think, for a word on the best club in London, West Ham United. And the way they're going, there's a lot of people saying they could become the next sort of attractive, sexy club of the capital, usurping Arsenal, I think. And David Moyes, perhaps the unlikely Scot to take the reins and make West Ham a really, really popular club the world over, do you think, this season?
Well, you know what? West Ham punched so much above their weight last season. It was unbelievable. I mean, that's the name of the game now, is to keep on doing and doing. And, you know, they've got players. Again, they've got a top manager. In my opinion, I think he's come in. There was a lot of work to be done there, what Pellegrini had left behind. He's cleared out the players. He's got his players in, and he's got good players. And what he does, he makes players better players. Look at Bowen. You know, he's got England call up, and rightly so. You know, man, that's down to the manager, top manager. Yeah, this is what I mean. It gets harder and harder. If you want to be successful this season, you've got to start taking 4 points off teams like West Ham and Palace. Yeah. So that tells you how hard it is. You know, Arsenal and Tottenham want to get fourth. You know, you've got to take 4 points off them two teams. That's going to be hard. That's how hard it is, you know, to go and beat them two teams. You know, so it just shows you how hard it is with West Ham, Crystal Palace. You know, Crystal Palace for me have got a good team. You know, go and take 4 points off them. That's hard. But at the moment, yeah, West Ham will have to start well. And fair play, they've kept Declan Rice, which I didn't think they could, if I'm being honest.
There you go. Apologies to Chelsea fans and Crystal Palace fans and Brentford fans and Fulham fans even. We didn't quite have time to get you in, but we will over the course of the next few weeks and when the season starts in just under a month now. Arsenal versus Crystal Palace get things underway on the 5th of August. Put that in your diary. Right, we're heading into one final break now, but still to come. Some comedy. Up-and-comer Rajiv Kauria on his first full hour of stand-up he'll be bringing to London after a very successful career in writing for big TV shows. We'll talk to him.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather. And know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather. And know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. We'll be finishing with a special interview with a fresh-faced young comedian from East London, tipped to be a big star. Rajiv Carrier has been writing for TV shows such as Have I Got News For You, the news quiz 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown and more. Well, he's now put together his first full hour of comedy and he'll be taking it to Edinburgh before a few shows in London. His set, Gallivant, is about his perception of the world as an adult compared to his more exciting dreams he once had as a teenager. I caught up with Rajiv.
I was ready to do a 45-minute show, or as it's affectionately known, a Coward's Hour in 2020. But obviously when the Fringe didn't happen that year, I was fortunate enough to get busy with other comedy work, which was really great, you know, writing on TV and radio and stuff like that. So now I'm going in for it, skipping the Coward's Hour, which is ironic because I am a coward.
The full hour, tell us a little bit about what kind of things you like to talk about. Because when you look at your sort of CV in terms of where you've been working so far, sort of a lot of newsy satire stuff. We've been writing for Have I Got News For You. Do you do a lot of that in your shows, or more of a personal kind of story?
I'd say it's more of a personal show. I think at the heart of it's a stand-up comedy show. And sure, there's a story about growing up and sort of the expectations of the things that I thought I was going to do versus the things I ended up doing. But it's more of a personal, observational. I mean, I hope it's funny to me. It's about my perspective. It's about my life. I hope it's funny to other people.
Yeah,
we'll have to see.
Because you're kind of tapping into what your parents have achieved by the time you get to your sort of late 20s, aren't you? And then you compare that to us, which I think is quite a very, very present thing in today's society. A lot of us getting to that age when our parents were at that age and going, how on earth did they earn that amount of money? You know, there's a lot of social anxiety. Is that what you're kind of tapping into?
Definitely, yeah. Like my parents, I think by the time they were my age, they were married, had a house and a kid on the way. I got none of those things, I don't think. And there's been such a huge generational shift, and they were immigrants as well, so their lives are obviously so much more difficult, so much harder than mine. My life's not difficult at all. I sometimes have to queue to get on the tube. That's probably about it.
Yeah, I certainly feel you there, but you know, often that anxiety is really coming through in our generation, particularly about when things on social media, people are seeing it so often, how much people seem to be achieving constantly, and that can make people feel. Do you sort of get involved in that with what you're writing about?
Yeah, I think definitely in the last, 10, 15 years, the sort of glory days of social media, we've got better than ever at peeking over the neighbour's fence. Back then, they just had to look over the neighbour's fence if they wanted to get any sense of that. There's no like Instagram or anything like that. And you're right, yeah, it's very easy to sort of think that you're not on the right track. And hopefully this show will offer up this idea of, you know, it's okay to forgive yourself. You can't be doing everything. You can't be having everyone else's fun. You just got to do your best. And I think there's a theme of that in the show, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned there's a lot of true stories in the show. Give us kind of one of those examples of those things that have happened that you talk about.
Well, I love true stories in comedy. I think it's weird. I think people tend to think they can separate what stand-up comedy is and what's just being funny with your friends. But the truth is, the hardest you've ever laughed, I can guarantee, wasn't watching a stand-up comedian. It was something that happened with your mates. It was something that happened in real life. That element of truth, that disbelief when something truly hilarious happens, elevates it to an incredible status. I remember laughing loads. I was in Stoke-on-Trent for work. Shout out to the West Midlands. And I was there with my co-worker who was a vegan, and he said, "Oh, let's go to a little vegan cafe for lunch." And I said, "Vegan cafe, Stoke-on-Trent?" All right, let's give it a go. So I put it in trusty Google Maps. Vegan cafe, Stoke-on-Trent, no results. And he said, "Why don't you put in salad shop?" So I put in salad shop, Stoke-on-Trent, and the first 3 results were Greg's, and the 4th was a florist. So there you go. Thanks a lot, Google. Creative solutions, I guess.
Yeah, it's not quite Stoke Newington, is it? Stoke-on-Trent.
Lovely people, though.
Nearly
very
there phonetically.
Proud of Robbie
but...
Williams, as they should be.
Talk us a bit, I mean, because you've had to come to this point, a lot of moving around. You've done a lot of Edinburgh. You've tried a lot of, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there around London. What are your favourite places to perform? And do you feel like you're now ready to do this full hour?
I don't know if anybody ever feels like they're ready, but I'm excited for it. And sort of as I work on it, I feel more and more confident with it. And it's never going to be perfect in your first hour. Speak to any sort of established comedians, they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, my first hour." Some of them will tell you it was rubbish. So there is obviously everyone's sort of trying to grasp for the Best Newcomer Award, which you're only eligible for when you do your first hour. Hence why the Cowards Hour means that you're not eligible for that. But you've just got to try and do the best you can. It might not be perfect, but whose first show ever is. And as for like doing 5s and 10s around London, I think you're spoiled for choice for like really great quality at like low prices at places like Bill Murray, Vauxhall Comedy Club, and then there are other like venues which hold like different sort of on and off gigs, like 21 Soho and 2 North Down, the Betsy Trotwood and stuff. You can really see a high standard of, I don't want to say TV names because it doesn't matter if you do TV or not, whether you're funny or not, but really great stand-up comedians doing surprisingly good stuff. There's a great standard in this country and in this city, and anyone can just go out and catch some of it. Yeah.
What do you make of comedy then, the way it's going? All the young comics coming into the mainstream now and the kind of feel of it nowadays. What's your opinion? Sometimes people were saying, stuff needs to be off limits. A lot of people perhaps complaining, rightly or wrongly, it's all getting a bit woke, those sort of things. How do you see stand-up comedy?
Yeah, I don't consider myself that sensitive. And I love that sort of argument about our comedy's getting too woke, because every time you go, "Oh, okay, right, let me hear some of your jokes there, some of these ropey ones." You strut in here with all like, "Oh, I'm offensive," and you give me this watered down porridge. Like, no, I don't want to hear it. And a lot of these comedians who sometimes get boxed in as woke are some of the actually the most brilliant, forward-thinking, or like creative comedians. I mean, some of my favourite comedians out there right now, you wouldn't know where their political leanings were, because they're past that. They're not really interested in doing things like that are politics. They want to think outside the box. Yeah.
And finally, you're going to be eventually taking this to Edinburgh, I presume, this August. This is the first time it's back properly now, Edinburgh.
Yeah, they did a short, sort of small Edinburgh run last year, which was really on like a month's notice. I was fortunate to go up and do 2 dates there at the Pleasance Courtyard. It was a real like a reduced capacity Edinburgh, just to get everyone excited again, but now they're back at full capacity.
And that's got to be probably, the peak of your year this year. That was such a really exciting week in Scotland, few weeks in Scotland, trying to really get this out there, I suppose.
It's the sort of the central point of the comedy calendar. Things are changing though. Obviously, you can read anywhere that accessibility at Edinburgh is getting harder and harder, and as a result, loads of comedians are taking control of their careers and not participating in the Edinburgh cycle, which is brilliant. But for a lot of us who are lucky enough to go, I mean, I love it up there. I have a great time. I speak to other comedians and say, "Don't you find it stressful?" I'm like, "Don't care. It's the most fun I have." "Your show's going terrible." "Don't care. I'm having a lovely time." And it's the pinnacle of the comedy year. So we're sort of on minus 3 weeks now, and it runs for, well, we call it the month really. I think it's a 4-week run, but there's nothing like it.
Do you still get nervous by the time you get to that third week, or are you now at a point where it's just sort of you're having so much fun and you're doing your act, you don't really care if people are enjoying it that evening, or you smash it one night and you don't the next, you're just kind of going through the motions, just kind of making sure you keep it up, I suppose?
Yeah, the nerves sort of change. I think, maybe you find yourself a couple of weeks in thinking, oh, I'm really happy with the show, but not as many people are seeing it as I thought they would, or the show's terrible, but I'm selling out. Who knows what? I think every Edinburgh is different. I'm really excited about this one because I'm really going for it. It's a proper debut. I've had a really good time in the past in sketch shows and a lot of shows on the PBH Free Fringe, but now I'm going, here we go, going to really try and give this a solid try, maybe get some reviews and sort of be a bit more polished.
There you go for those London dates. Rajiv will be in London on the 20th in Farringdon and on the 26th at the Pleasance Theatre in Islington for that new hour. Right, let's just take a look at the weather before we leave you this evening. Tonight will be a rather cloudy, but a few clearer interludes later. A very sticky night to come, I'm afraid. It will still be around 23 degrees when it's 2 a.m, so no respite until the morning, and building to another very warm day tomorrow, a 30-degree high. Wednesday and Thursday, both very bright, very sunny, around 28 degrees for both at its peak, until temperatures get a bit ridiculous as we head into the weekend. Warnings are in place as we could hit 40 degrees on Sunday or Monday, but don't alarm yourselves with that just yet. It's only Tuesday for now. Right, that is all we've got time for this evening. Thank you for watching. Join us again at the same time tomorrow for a lot more.